My name is Andrew Alexander Forsythe. You'll be glad to hear I'm not nearly as long-winded as these three. I was born in Harrisonville, Louisiana in 1861 when the Civil War was just getting started. From a very, very young age, I knew that I wanted to be a physician when I grew up. My father, James, owned a little mercantile in Harrisonburg, and he also substitute taught at the local parish high school. Well, once I started to tell him that I wanted to be a doctor, he realized that this young man really did want to be a doctor. And so he sent me for my early education to a boarding school in Chicago, Illinois, where I got an excellent education. I was a smart lad, but the good school helped a lot later in life. When I returned to Monroe, I picked a school that I thought would be prestigious for a medical school, and that was Tulane in New Orleans. I had a very successful academic career while at Tulane, and I'm proud to say I graduated from medical school at the top of my class, valedictorian. I decided rather than go to a big city and be a physician, I would go back to my little hometown of Harrisonburg, where I opened a practice, and they also elected me coroner of that parish. I was one of the few surgeons that had medical practices in this part of the world. It shortly became apparent that I needed a larger practice, and to do that, I came here, brought it to Monroe. I enjoyed about 10 years from the early 1890s until 1898, when I was very active in politics during that time and was a good citizen, and somebody had the audacity to come to me and ask me to run for mayor. I was a doctor. I didn't know anything about governing people. So I laughed. I said, no, that's not yours. You find somebody that's qualified to run. Well, people, not only was I not qualified, but I made about $10,000 a year in my medical practice. Guess what the mayor job paid? $600. So you understand why I had second thoughts about going for this mayor thing. But in the end, my friends won out, and I ran. And I won. Who knew? I learned quickly that I was the right man for the job. I listened to the people, fought with the city council. That's what mayors are supposed to do. Every project that I came up with was expensive. But the people of the city wanted these projects to happen. And I found ways to make it happen. And I'll tell you about a few of them. One of the things that I was most proud of in the early days of the administration was the fact that Monroe was one of the first municipalities to actually own its utilities. The gas company, the electric company, all those were farmed out in other cities. We bought them under my administration. So we controlled them. That was a good thing. I was mayor, by the way, for 16 years, from 1898 till 1914. I'm proud of that. In fact, when I died in office in 1914, those powers that be in Monroe said that I probably would have won another 2 terms unopposed. That's how popular I was. I'm proud of being popular. One of the first things we did was to pave some streets around here. You can't imagine what Monroe was like before we started paving streets. When it rained, it was a mess, and it rains a lot here. We paved over 20 miles of Monroe streets. And another thing we did that I'm very, very proud of. Now, close your eyes for a minute and imagine what Monroe was like before we had underground sewers. Not pretty, is it? Well, it wasn't pretty, and I managed to lay 12 miles of sewer under the streets of Monroe. Yes, I'm proud of that. Awfully proud of that. Another thing I did was to build a trolley line, and the city of Monroe was the very first city in America to own its own transit company. That would become what is today Monroe City Buses. But it all started out with the trolley line. They came to me and they said, Mayor, we want one of the finest high schools in the South. So I got with my architects and we designed that. Pretty impressive, huh? One of the things about the building itself, you see the turret here? There's a turret just like that on the other side. And my architects and engineers got together and devised this crazy plan so that when the fire bell rang and all the kids had to evacuate the building, you got on a slide on the third floor and you slid all the way down to the ground. Now that sure beats walking quietly, doesn't it? This building was unique too in that it had a basement. We don't have many basements in Monroe, but we decided we were going to design this one with a cafeteria underneath the school. Pretty impressive building. I'm proud of that as well. But one of the things that I'm proudest of was the swimming pool. It came about by accident, actually. I was told by some of my advisors that there was oil underneath the property that is now Forsythe Park. So, being the gentleman who had the city's best interest in mind, I bought it. And I drilled. I spent $2,000 of 1910 money drilling that well. Guess what? Wasn't no oil there. But I got second best. I got one of the largest saltwater aquifers that had ever been hit in the South. So I had a bunch of smelly, hot, sulfurous water under the ground. Now what am I going to do with that? I told my people, I said, I want you to build a natatorium, a saltwater natatorium. That's the biggest and the best. And we'll turn it into a tourist attraction. People will come from miles around just to go to this natatorium. They built the natatorium. We piped the gas up into the first gas lights in the city of Monroe. I mean, it was a big deal, folks. This was before cable, all right? And people did come. They came from other states just to, it was thought this water smelled bad, it was hot, and it was salty. Had to be good for you, right? So people came from all over the country to enjoy the water. And it did, in fact, become a tourist attraction. Now, I ran the trolley line from, pretty smart if I do say so myself, ran the trolley line from downtown to the pool. So you could get on public transit anywhere along that line and get to the swimming pool. Did I forget anything?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Remember that fizzy drink man?
Oh, I do.
German-sounding
I do
name?
forget Mr. Biedenhorn. Yes, Mr. Biedenhorn lived across the street from where this pool was built. As you go over the levee now, if you look to your left, you will see a body of water between the levee and the river. That was the exhaust of the swimming pool, basically, okay? That's where the pool was. Mr. Biedenhorn lived catty-cornered across the street where the Bible Museum is now. And he stood out one day and he looked across there and he said, again, this was the first gas in town. He looked across and he said, you know, bottling Coca-Cola as I am and making as much money as I am, I believe I can afford to have some of that gas piped from over there to over here, and I'll be the first one in town to have lights and a resident. And that's what he did. So Joe Biedenhorn, that's a story most people don't know about the Biedenhorn family, that they had the first lights in town. Now, when I died, a couple of things happened that I'm very, very proud of. For one thing, all the businesses closed in remembrance of me. And all the school children in Monroe, some 1,500, gathered and had a march through town to say thank you, Mayor Forsythe. That touched me. That felt good. The other thing that happened upon my death was the city of Monroe donated a marker, a marble marker, for my grave. And that's what it says. The end.